of the Philippines. The Pre-Colonial Literary Period.
Panaginip lang pala.
Ayan, ang aga-aga ng gising ni Lloyd. Naantok pa nga ako eh. Ba't ba tayo pinapatawag?
Oo nga eh, ano bang meron?
Hulaan ko, may chika yan si Lloyd.
Ay nako, siguro nga.
Guys, relax. Hindi kayo maniniwala sa ikikwento ko na naginip ako kagabi that we're in the middle of a field trip. At andun nga din kayo.
Wait, tour guide ba ako dyan?
Nasa museum tayo, no?
Tapos may phone booth, no? Oh my gosh. So, ibig sabihin, iisa lang yung panaginip nating lahat.
Mismo. At bigla tayong napunta sa
Pre-colonial
period.
Wow! So, totoo nga talaga.
Oo nga.
Hi everyone, I am Ate Faye, your tour guide for today. Before your field trip ends, I want you to learn about the important events in literature, learn about the literary themes and styles, learn about the notable works and authors, and analyze how ancient culture, politics, and religion of early Filipinos affected their way of writing. To start our day, can I have Miss Misabilia to be our prayer leader?
Let us bow our heads and feel the presence of the Lord. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for giving us another day to impart our knowledge and to learn. Thank you for keeping each and every one of us safe and healthy in this middle of the pandemic. May you grant us the willingness and patience to learn, and the wisdom and heart to be compassionate and understanding to our fellow classmates and teachers. This is all we ask in Jesus' mighty name. Amen.
Two hours later.
It's already 10:30 in the morning. We have arrived to our first destination. We are now at the National Museum.
A few moments later.
Why is the phone ringing?
I don't know.
Did you dial it?
Sabi magbintang, sagutin mo na lang kasi.
Oh, teka lang. Bakit ako?
Dali na, lilibre na lang kita ng milk tea.
Anyway, sige na nga. Hello?
Bugtong, ito'y pahalagahan pagkat ito'y dadaan lamang.
The phone booth brings us back in time, before the arrival of Spaniards. And Philippine literature already exists. It is oral in nature, and it is full of lessons from birth to grave, its blessings and consequences. Our ancestors already have their own organized system of communities, with laws enacted to promote social welfare and to protect the people, the nature, and the spirits. This was the Maginoo, Datu, Maharlika, Limawa, and Alipin. They also have their own indigenous writing system, and it is called the Baybayin. It is also known as the oldest writing system of the Philippines. All in all, almost all of the important events of ancient people here in the Philippines were somewhat connected with some religious observance, rites, and ceremonies, with some poetry commonly recited, chanted, or sung. And in the year 1521, the pre-colonial period of the Philippines ended with Magellan's discovery of the Philippines.
Did you know that most of the pre-colonial literary works, including all the written works, were burned by the Spanish colonizers?
Well, if you're thinking, how did some notable works still survive up to this day? Well, the answer is simple, because of the word of mouth. Some of the notable works that are still known up to this date are Guman, Darangin, Hudhud, Lamang, Hinilawod, and of course, Kudaman. Guman is a pre-colonial notable work that originated from the Subanon in Zamboanga. Well, if you are quite curious on what is the Guman of Dumalinaw, or also known as Guman itself, well, So this is where the story of the Guman of Dumalinaw begins. The kingdom of Mount Diliagan is set in the mountainous regions of Zamboanga Peninsula, which is drained by a straight river whose bottom is lined with porcelain and beads of gold, and whose banks are bordered by flowering plants. Dato Pumbuana, his wife Paislaga, and their young daughter rule the kingdom. They live in an 8-room mansion with furniture made of gold. Dato Pumbuana and Paislaga used to have other children, but their daughters drowned in the river, and their sons, venturing out in the search for them, failed to return. The other members of the household are Sampilakan and Tinayobo. One day, while Dato Pumbuana is making a shield, he hears disturbing sounds from the sea. War vessels are coming. Tinayobo sounds the magical gong, and as she beats them, the masts and the outriggers of the invading ships are shattered. After 6 days, the enemy sent by 3 evil queens land. They start to scale the mountain to reach the kingdom, but because the mountain keeps growing taller, it takes the invaders a month and a half to reach the summit. When they reach the royal household, the invaders are met by Tinayobo. They strike her with a kampilan or blade, but the blows lands on the porch, damaging it. Tinayobo restores it in a flash. Dato Pumbuana and Sampilakan joins the fight. After a month, however, 2 old warriors grow exhausted, and they fall to the ground. This prompts their daughter, Beri Diliagan, to fight. Initially, she successfully battles the enemies, but after a month, a young man, Sakandal, told Diliagan is under attack, and he appears to help. He restores the princess' spirit and beauty, and as he goes to the mansion with her, the strength of Dato Pumbuana and Sampilakan is restored. The base parents take notice of the young man and hope that he will propose to their daughter someday. The daughter is then given a name, Pailala mo Rebolak, for she has come of age. She is also given a chewing box. As she chews, her beauty increases. She then learns about her brother and sisters. Meanwhile, Sakandal goes to the battle in the kingdom of Tomanong. For days, Pailalam Rebolak observes him fight from the mansion's porch. Sakandal meets the chief of Tomanong. As they fight with their kampilan, the enemy causes the river to be overrun by fire. But Sakandal drowns it with flood. After 2 weeks of fighting, the chief of Tomanong retreats almost lifeless. Sakandal too is exhausted, but Pailalam Rebolak finds him and restores his strength. Pailalam Rebolak receives a message from the maiden of Patola, who is asking whether she should go with a stranger who has come to Mount Patola. Sakandal takes his ring and gives it to Pailalam Rebolak, telling her to knot it in the kerchief and send it to the maiden of Patola. The invaders arrive ahead of Sakandal's ring. The ring drops and becomes unknotted. Out of the ring comes a man named Salilayan. He helps defeat the invaders. The kerchief returns to the mansion, and Sakandal asks Pailalam what else he can do for her. She asks him to lend her his magical powers. She is given a kerchief with 18 gold rings knotted to it. The Guman shifts to the kingdom of Pagkatulongan. The kingdom is in the same situation as Diliagan. With no fighting men, the women of the kingdom are inspired to fight. A man named Madlawe helps them, just as Sakandal has helped Pailalam Rebolak. The second part, however, may be said to be more magical than the first. Pailalam Rebolak appears to take an important role. The Guman ends with the return of the missing children. A traditional buklog or feast is held to celebrate the union of the two kingdoms. For the second notable work, we have the Darangen from the Maranaos. It is known for its 17 cycles, in which each cycle contains a self-contained story. But the most notable cycle is the exploits of the Batugan. If you're in the region of Cordillera, the most famous epic in there is the Hudhud ni Aliguyan, or also known as Hudhud. It is known to be performed or chanted Well, if you're in the Kailokanuhan, might as well know the story of Lamang, or also known as Biyag ni Lamang. It is a famous epic story among the Kailokanuhan, and it is about the bravery of in a place in Panay which is called Sulod. They have an epic called Hinalawad, or also known as the Tales from the Mouth of the River. It is known to be performed for actually 3 days, not just a day but 3 days. So it takes that long to be performed. In the area of Palawan, we have an epic story called Kudaman. If you think that Hinalawad is the longest epic in the Philippines, well, might as well think again, because the Kudaman would take not just days, but a week to be performed.
There are many literary forms during this period. First is the riddles or mga bugtong. These are statements that contain superficial words but they function figuratively and as metaphors. These are questions that demand deeper answers. Riddles showcase the Filipino wit, literary talent, and keen observations. This is made up of one or more measured lines with rhymes and may consist of 4 to 12 syllables. This is used in the past as form of game in small or large gatherings. Sabi ng dato, kailangan niya raw ng mga alipin, ngunit para makapasa, kailangan raw ay magbugtong. Bugtong-bugtong, iisa ang pasukan, 3 ang lalabasan. Bugtong-bugtong, heto na naman si Kaka, bubuka-bukaka. The next literary form is proverbs. It is a simple and concrete saying, popularly known and repeated, that expresses a truth based on common sense or experience. These are usually given by parents or elders of the community. A proverb describes a basic rule of conduct, may also be known as a maxim. These have been customarily used and served as law or rules on good behavior by our ancestors. To others, these are like allegories or parables that impart lessons for the young. Hayaan na lang sinasabi sa atin ng mahirap isingin ang kung may tulugan ay may aanib. The next literary form is folk song. It is a form of folk lyric which expresses the hopes and aspirations, the people's lifestyle as well as their loved ones. It is bounded by the learning of good morals, inspired by the reaction of the people to their environment. An example is Kuyayi and Kundi. Other folk songs are lullabies, drinking songs, love songs, religious songs, and song of death. Lullabies are locally known as the hele. These are songs to put to sleep babies. The fountain fairies, but usually parents sing this with idea on how hard life is and how they hope that their child will not experience the hardship of life. Drinking songs are locally known as tagay and are sung during drinking sessions. Love songs to many Filipinos are known as the harana. It can also be called courtship songs and are used by young men to capture the heart of the girl that they love. Religious songs are songs or chant that are usually given during exorcisms and thanksgiving during good harvest. Lastly is the song of death. These are lamentations that contain the role of good deeds that the dead has usually done to immortalize his or her good image. Folktales are stories of native Filipinos. These deal with the power of nature personified, their submission to a deity, usually Bathala, and how the deity is responsible for the blessings and calamities. Under folktales is myth, legend, fables, and epics. Myths are traditional stories occurring in a timeless past. They involve supernatural elements and are beyond the frontier of logic. Legends are stories about real people who are famous for doing something brave or extraordinary. Every time the story was told, it becomes more exaggerated, and so it is now difficult to tell how much of the story is really true. Fables are short or brief stories that cater the children of native Filipinos and are usually bounded by good manners and right conduct. These stories use animals, as characters that represent a particular value or characteristic. An example is Conejo at ang Pagong at Sitwang Tamad. Lastly is the epics in the Philippines during the pre-colonization. They are considered ethno-epic because they are histories of various ethnic groups. Epics revolve around supernatural events or heroic deeds, and they embody or validate the beliefs and customs and ideals of a community.
Philippine literature is a diverse and rich group of works that has evolved side by side with the country's history. Literature had started with fables and legends made by the ancient Filipinos long before the arrival of the Spanish influence. The main themes of the Philippine literature focus on the country's pre-colonial cultural traditions and the socio-political histories of its colonial and contemporary English. Additional information: Philippines is an archipelago country consisting of several islands, 7,107 islands to be exact. And each of those islands has its specifications of cultures and traditions, bearing different set of native literature. Indigenous Philippine literature was based on tradition and customs of a particular area of the country. Literature is handed down through us to the word of mouth and written in perishable materials like dried leaves, bamboo cylinder, and the bark of trees. Did you know that Filipinos during our time were not confined to a single religion? There is the existence of Anitos, records of Bathala, as well as the arrival of Islam in the 14th century. Our era had a decentralized system wherein there are different chiefs for each government. We have datus for barangay. These rulers are recognized through their inheritance from the male bloodline, the succession from their father and passed down to their descendants. Yes, you heard it right. There were no female rulers during our era. Yet, the Babaylan held positions of authority as religious leaders, community doctors, and healers in some pre-colonial Philippine societies. The vital role and functions of the Babaylan were highly recognized and embodied in the traditional role of woman in the barangay. Cross-dressing males sometimes took on the role of the female Babaylan. Did you know that the punishments given are through the form of penalty or death peonage and servitude, which is also called as being an alipin? And they also have the judicial system where they follow oral traditions and customs of their ancestors. In addition to that, the symbolism is part and parcel of the pre-colonial Filipino warrior culture. A certain clothing, tattoo, or cicatrix may connote the wearer's status in the warrior society. They were called pintadas, and the general term for tattoos in Visayas is batok. As we all know, the evolution of the Philippine literature depended on the influence of colonization and the spirit of the age.
Grabe, nakaka-amaze. Par talaga tayo nag-teleport papunta sa pre-colonial period.
Oo nga, hindi lang tayo nag-teleport, ang dami pa nating natutunan.
Mismo ulit. Sobrang dami nating natutunan. At alam nyo ba, sobra din ako na-amaze dun sa governance and their hierarchy status of living. Isipin nyo, naninirahan sila sa communities na tinatawag na barangay, na hanggang ngayon, meron pa din. Pero noon, 30 to 100 families lang, yun nandun sa barangay. Pero ngayon, tinan mo, sobrang dami natin. At meron pang iba, yung Maharlika at Timawa. Yung mga feudal warriors nila noon, na ngayon ay yung katumbas sa mga armed forces natin, mga police, at marami pang iba. At panghuli ay yung alipin. Isipin nyo, hindi lang sila basta alipin na kinakawawa lang. Pero meron silang dalawang kinds. Yung isa is alipin sa gigilid at yung pangalawa ay alipin na mamahay.
Wow, hindi lang ikaw may natutunan, no? I also learned their literary styles are based on oral traditions and their themes are based on good and evil, courage and heroism, death and rebirth, and gods and goddesses.
Oh, wait. Alam niyo ba, during our trip, na-realize ko na people during those times are really smart. Imagine ha, nagchichismisan kayo tapos bugtong yung gagamitin. Like, gusto ko lang ng tea, kailangan ko pa mag-isip. Their politics, religion, and culture really affected their way of writing. And na-adapt natin siya in daily lives.
Siyempre, papahuli ba ako? Grabe. Sinunog na ng mga Spaniards lahat ng mga gawa nila. Pero hanggang ngayon nakasurvive pa rin yung ibang mga notable works. Such as yung Guman, Darangin, Hudhud, Lamang, Hinilawod, tsaka Kudaman. Galing pa yun sa iba't ibang parte ng Pilipinas, ha? Pero kung babasahin mo talaga ng maigi yung mga notable works, malalaman mo na halos yung mga notable works na yun is yung mga epic na pinaperform pag may mga ceremonies at saka yung mga celebration. Grabe, ang galing pala talaga ng history at saka literature ng Pilipinas, no?
Oo nga, agree ako dyan. Alam nyo, after this pandemic, dapat talaga nating puntahan yung museum na yan.
True, need na talaga natin makapunta doon.
Ay naku, puntahan talaga natin. Feeling ko marami talaga tayong matututunan sa history ng Pilipinas pag ipinag-aralan natin ng mabuti yung literature natin, di ba? Agree ba kayo dyan?
Agree.
Yes.
Tama.